areas of Tawheed. Now, what remains for us is looking at shirk in some particular aspects where people have gone astray. One of the major areas wherein people have gone astray in shirk is in the area of, in Allah's names and attributes, is in the area of what we refer to as al-ulu, or the transcendency of Allah. The concept of Allah being above and beyond His creation. A very important concept. Because for the mass of Muslims today, if you ask them where is Allah, their response will be, in general, Allah is everywhere. This is the common response of the mass of Muslims in the world today. However, the belief that Allah is everywhere is in fact the foundation of idolatry. It is a necessary foundation for those who believe in worshipping Allah through His creation. It is explained by this principle or this concept that Allah is everywhere. Now, if we ask, for example, the Hindu who believes in the one absolute God, Brahman, why he is worshipping this idol which he made with his own hands, somebody made for him or whatever. If he is the average Hindu who has not philosophized on the matter, he will just, or she will say, this God brings me good. I worship Ganesh, who is the elephant head God. He has the body of a human being and the head of an elephant. It's popular, Ganesh. And when I pray to him, I get good. My prayers are answered. I get rewards. That's why. No problem. And it's the same thing, same line of argument, which sometimes when you're trying to explain Islam to Christians, they will say, I have experienced God, Jesus, in my life. You understand? You are believing this because you didn't experience Jesus in your life. You know, I have turned to Him, I have prayed, and my prayers were answered. This is my proof. I know that Jesus is God. Right? This is the argument. So for that kind of argument, you take them back to the Hindu. Okay, what about the Hindu who prays to Ganesh and his or her prayers are answered? What do you think? Ganesh is God? Or the animist who prays to the trees or the rivers and their prayers are answered? What do you think? The trees and the rivers are God? Of course the Christian will say no. These are not God. So I said, then who is answering their prayers? The God, real God. It's God who is answering their prayers. Not the rivers and the trees or the idols. It's God. And we say the same thing with Jesus. You think that Jesus is answering your prayers, but it is God who is answering your prayers. And really, the difference between Ganesh and Jesus is only semantics. They're only words. In reality, Jesus was part of God's creation, just as Ganesh and the others are part of God's creation. So in the same way, it wasn't God answering those who prayed to His creation, whether they were praying to stones and sticks or to idols. It is also God not answering, it's God who's answering the prayer, and not the individual, the human being who you believe to be God. But now if you speak to the educated Hindu who has philosophized his religion, he studied under a few yogis or whatever, and you ask him or her, why are you worshipping this object of your own creation? They'll say, we're not worshipping it. Please don't misunderstand. We are not worshipping this idol that you see before you. No. We are worshipping Brahman, the one absolute God, who is everywhere, pervades everything. But at the time of our worship of our idol, Brahman becomes concentrated inside of the idol. So we're worshipping God who is concentrated in the idol and not the idol itself. Just like you're worshipping the Kaaba. And we say, no, we're not worshipping the Kaaba. We're worshipping God. So it's the same thing. There you are bowing down to this black cube, and you insist that you're not worshipping it, but you're bowing down before it. Of course, there is a qualitative difference. Right? There is a difference here. Because for those who worship these idols, believing that God is concentrated in the idol, if you take away the idol, can they worship? No. They have to have the idol. Whereas, if somebody takes away the Kaaba, can we still worship? Of course we can. In fact, you can go inside of the Kaaba and worship. It would be inconceivable for them to be climbing inside of their idols and worshiping. It doesn't work. That doesn't work. Okay? So there is a qualitative difference between what we're doing and what they're doing. Right? But, unfortunately, Muslims confuse this issue in the minds of these people. They confuse it. Why? By putting in their homes pictures of the Kaaba. Putting on their prayer rugs pictures of the Kaaba. So everywhere they go and they're going to pray, there is this image of the Kaaba. So to those externally who are looking at these things, it's just like we're worshipping the Kaaba. So it's wrong, really, to put pictures of the Kaaba on our prayer rugs, on our walls, it's wrong. It's error. And it misguides people. Of course, there's another point that you should know, that many Hindus have this belief concerning our worship of the Kaaba. Not what I just said. There's another belief that they have. One Hindu from England, living in Toronto, I was flying to England, and he was sitting beside me, so we got in this conversation, and we became friendly. So he now felt he could ask me a question. He said, listen, I have this question that's been bothering me all my life, but I couldn't ask any Muslim. I had Muslim friends, but I felt shy to ask them this, But, I can see you are open-minded and, you're coming from a Western background, so do you mind if I ask you this question? I said, sure, go ahead. He said, growing up, my parents told me, my brothers and sisters, that inside the Kaaba, you have one of our gods called Shiva Lingam. I started to laugh, of course, I said, he looked at me, smiled, he saw me laughing, And he said, yeah, that's what they told us, It was and also in Medina. That's what you have there in that mosque of the Prophet. You got Shiva Lingam there too. Well, I explained to him that, of course, no, this is not true. We don't have any one of your idols inside of the Kaaba. You can go inside the Kaaba, it's open, there's nothing inside there. Anyway, so if you're giving da'wah to Hindus, just be aware of this, that a number of them have this idea, this concept that we have inside of the Kaaba one of their gods. And it's good for you actually when you're involved in this thing too. You should go and look up what Shiva Lingam stands for. You go up and look up what Lingam stands for and you'll be shocked. Right? Anyway, but it's good to know it, because in the course of da'wah with them, it's good to clarify these points, because sometimes they don't even realize it themselves. Anyway, what we're saying here is that this belief in God being everywhere is the basis of a number of these individuals who believe in idolatry. And it becomes the justification for Al-Hallaj, who we spoke about earlier, is from the 10th century, who claimed an al-Haq. He was a Sufi. He became what they call among the Sufi saints, who was put in the hierarchy of saints. And people will call on him, Al-Hallaj, He was known for this famous statement, An al-Haq. When the Muslim judges brought him before them, and asked him to retract this statement because of its implications, he stood up in the court and he opened up his cloak and said, there is nothing inside this cloak except Allah. So he removed from them any doubts about what he intended. At that point, the only thing left to do was to execute him. So they cut off his head. Of course, the Sufis in their books, they write that when his head was cut off and it hit the ground rolling, it kept on saying, An al-Haq, An al-Haq, An al-Haq. They said, okay, this is proof that what he was saying was right. He was killed, wrongly, etc., etc. Really, he was on the truth. Of course, for us, even though this story is probably apocryphal, not authentic, if we concede to them that it did happen, no problem. Because if we go to the case of Prophet Musa, when he went to the top of Mount Tur to receive revelation, and he left behind Harun and the people, and that individual, as Samiri, he asked the people to give them their jewelry. He got their jewelry together, he melted it all down, and he threw in the mix some dust, as he said, from the footprint of an angel, right? And from that he made the golden calf, and he called all the people around, and he said to them, this is the God of Moses, the one who Moses is going on top of the mount to receive revelation from. This is the God, this golden calf. Now, do you think the people just said, MashaAllah, let's worship it, and they just bowed down and started worshiping the calf? No. People were looking at it. Are you serious? Then what happened? The cow said, moo. That's what Allah says in the Quran. The cow lowed. It said, moo. He said, whoa, this is the God of Moses. They dropped down and bowed. When the cow communicated, right, this was what convinced the people that this was God. Now, how do we explain that? Did the cow actually low? No. We know that the jinn that can possess individuals as well as objects entered into the cow and said moo, and the people thought it was the cow. Similarly, the jinn can go into the head chopped off of Hallaj and keep saying An al-Haq, An al-Haq, An al-Haq. If that's what you need, they're there for you, right? So we don't have a problem with that claim. Now, of course, we have other groups like the Druze. You hear about the Druze in Lebanon. Their belief also is that God became carnate, human, in the form of the last of the Fatimid rulers in Egypt, called Al-Hakim bi Amrillah. They believe that he became God in that person. The Ismaili Shiites, Aga Khanis, right, whose leader is Abdul Karim Aga Khan, they believe that their Imam is God incarnate. In fact, when one of the earlier Imams of theirs, the one who was weighed and given his body weight in gold, in platinum, and in diamonds by his followers, when he was asked in Egypt, because they were based in Egypt, when he was asked, why do you allow your people to worship you? He said, in my country, people worship a cow. He's from India. Surely I'm better than a cow. Another individual was known by Ibn Arabi. He was a Spanish Sufi who became very popular of the 12th century, 13th century. He, in his writings and teachings, promoted the idea that everything was Allah and Allah was everything. Because when you say Allah is everywhere, then you go inside of every atom, inside of every neutron and proton and electron and quark or whatever, individual particles, Allah is there. So in the end, what exists but Allah? Everything is Allah, and Allah is everything. And this is known as monism. In English, they refer to it philosophically as monism. Everything is Allah, and Allah is everything. Now this belief, in some of his writings, he told his people, why are you worshipping someone beyond you, God who is beyond you? God is in you and God is in me. You don't need to worship any God beyond yourself. Worship yourself. Right? This is clear deviation. Some people say, to say that Allah is above His creation is to put Him in a place. This is one of the arguments. They say it's to put Him in a place. Inside of the four dimensions of height, width, depth, so on and so. They're putting Him in a location to say He's above. Well, we say no, it is not. To say He is everywhere is to put Him in a place. Because you've put Him inside of His creation. That is putting Him in a place. When we say He is beyond His creation, we're not putting Him in a location, because location came into existence with creation. Allah is where He was before He created. He's in the same place. Not bound by time, space, etc., etc. He's in the same place. He's beyond His creation. And when you go up in the creation, through the seven heavens, you end up with the highest level of the seven heavens. After that comes what? The kursi. The footstool, which is over everything. Wasi'a kursi was samawati wal ard. His footstool encompasses the universe. And beyond that, above it, and the universe in relationship to the footstool is like a brass ring thrown in the middle of the desert. The desert being like the footstool, and the whole of creation, the whole universe, which is expanding and all these other things, is like that brass ring in the middle of a desert. And the kursi, in relationship to the arsh, or the throne of Allah, is like the brass ring thrown in the middle of the desert. So what do you think we are like in relationship to the kursi? This is what Prophet ﷺ said. Authentic narrations describing the creation. And Allah, and that is the end of creation. The arsh, that is the end of creation. What is beyond the arsh? Allah. Not inside of His creation, but beyond the creation. So we don't have to, as he said, have the idea that Allah is behind some planet, etc., etc. No. Allah controls everything in the universe without having to be inside of it. You see, their idea is to make Allah like us. If you want to control things, you have to be inside. You have to be on the spot. But we, in our own way, look at the ability to do things by remote control as being advancements of technology. When we send a Mars explorer to Mars, and it gets down over there, and we're here manipulating some things, sending the signals, and the Mars lander comes out and it rolls around, picks up some Earth, and does all this kind of stuff. We consider this an advancement in technology. We don't have to be on Mars to do that. So hey, if we can accept that as advancement, surely Allah is beyond that. Surely Allah is beyond that. He doesn't have to be inside of His creation to control it. Now, if one looks at proofs, this is just some logical reasoning to deal with some of the arguments, reasoned arguments that they make. But if we go to human nature And we want to determine, because we're saying that belief in Allah as He is actually natural. It agrees with the basic nature with which people were created. If we want to understand the natural understanding, we need to go to the child. The little child, 5 years old, 4 years old, 6 years old. We ask that child, where is Allah? And of course his parents have indoctrinated him that Allah is everywhere. So he says, Allah is everywhere. And then you ask the child, is Allah in filth and places of filth? What is the child going to say? No. No. You can't believe Allah is in filth. No. He'll reject that. The child, she will reject that right off. Naturally, they reject the idea that the creator of this universe is within filth of this world that we consider nasty, we're flushing it away or whatever we're doing with it. And the child will then go on to give you examples of where Allah isn't. He will look around and say, hey, Allah's not in my chair either, because I'm sitting on the chair. Right? Doesn't make sense. Allah is not in my pencil, because the point breaks and I have to resharpen it again. Right? Allah is not in this place. And it goes and tell you all these different places. They will tell you where Allah isn't. Because naturally, they understand that it is against reason to accept that Allah is within these lowly states of His creation. Now, of course, when you're discussing with a person who has gone to school now, he graduated, he did philosophy 101 or whatever, and you're now trying to give this kind of discussion with that person, and you put to the person, hey, what do you think? You believe Allah is in filth? The person will stop for a minute. Ooh. Inside their hearts, they know this is not right. But they don't want to lose the argument. That's what philosophy 101 taught you, right? Don't lose the argument. You can use this logic and that logic or whatever and get out of any argument. So they say, yes. Though inside their hearts, they don't believe it. Because they don't want to lose the argument. So you can't, as I said, you want to check this natural proof, you got to go to the kids. Because the kids are not about winning or losing the argument. They just tell you what comes to them naturally. Whereas adults, they have another agenda. Right? Now, if we go beyond the natural arguments to what may be called the prayer proof, the proof in prayer that Allah is not within His creation, the very fact that worshipping objects of Allah's creation is forbidden is proof that Allah is not within His creation. Because were He in His creation, then what's wrong with worshipping each other, worshipping the idols, everything else? We have to say this is okay. Why not? But Islam, of course, forbids that. Proof can also be found in the principle of the ascension, the Mi'raj, where Prophet Muhammad ﷺ goes up into the heavens, to the highest heaven, where the angels could not go beyond, and Allah communicated with him. Allah was above him, above His throne. This is all among the evidences. And we can find in the Quran a variety of different verses which speak about things going up to Allah, whether it is the angel and the spirit, which ascend to Him in a day whose length is like 50,000 years. تعرج الملائكة والروح إليه في يوم كان مقداره 50,000 سنة. Or Allah talks about good sayings going up to Him. إليه يصعد الكلم الطيب. Or we find Allah describing Himself as Al-Qahir, for example, فوق عبادي. وهو القاهر فوق عبادي. He is the irresistible above His worshippers. Or Allah uses the attribute Al-Ali, right? Al-Ali, which means the one above which there is nothing, the highest. And Allah describes the believers saying, يَخَافُونَ رَبَّهُمْ مِنْ فَوْقِهِمْ, those who fear their Lord who is above him. But the final evidence, because of course some people may bring some other verses from the Quran and we look at them. where Allah said that He's closer to you than your jugular vein, and say, hey, what does that mean? We say before looking at that, let's go to the Sunnah. We've looked at the Quran, so many verses in the Quran pointing to Allah being above His creation. And we can find in Sahih Muslim. In Sahih Muslim, in volume 1, page 306, as well as in Sahih Bukhari, volume 9, page 386. We can find, this is in Sahih Muslim alone, volume 1, page 271. Volume 1, page 271. A hadith by Muawiyah ibn al-Hakam, in which he narrates that he had a slave girl who was tending his flock of sheep in a particular location called Jawariya. One day he came to check up on his flock, and he found that some sheep were missing. So he asked the girl, where are the sheep? She said a wolf came and ran off with them. He got mad, he got upset, so he slapped her in her face, whack, as parents in ignorance do to their children today. People who call themselves Muslims. But he realized when he did this, he had committed a grave error, because Prophet Muhammad ﷺ had forbade the slapping of or hitting of anything in its face. Not even a dog or a donkey were not allowed to hit anything or anybody in its face. And that's why boxing is haram. Boxing is haram, because it's all about knocking that guy out by punching him in his face. Right? Anyway, the point is that he realized his wrong. So he went to Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and told him what took place. When he did, the Prophet ﷺ became extremely upset. He became, red with anger. And so he asked the Prophet ﷺ, can I free her as penance, atonement for what I've done? The Prophet ﷺ said, okay, bring her. When he brought her, he asked her two questions. The first question he said to her was, Aina Allah? Where is Allah? He could have asked her, do you believe in Allah? But he didn't. He asked her, where is Allah? Why? Because people there believed in Allah. As I mentioned the verse before, if you ask them who created the heavens and earth, they say Allah. But their idea of Allah was confused. They had somehow believing Allah was within the creation, in their idols, and all these other kind of things. So he wanted to know, did she have the Islamic clarity? So he asked her, Aina Allah? Where is Allah? And she said, Fis sama, above the heavens. Then he asked her, Waman ana? And who am I? And she said, Anta Rasulullah. You are the messenger of Allah. So he then turned to Muawiyah ibn al-Hakam and he said to him, A'tiqha fa innaha mu'mina. Free her because she is a true believer. So after that, is there any room for anybody to say otherwise? No. This sunnah is clear. Some people say, when you ask them, where is Allah? You shouldn't be asking this question. Hey, Rasulullah ﷺ asked this question. Have you tell us we shouldn't ask the question? It's a legitimate question asked by Rasulullah. And the correct answer is above the heavens. And we should teach our children that from the time they're able to speak. Where is Allah? Allah is above the heavens. That child who grows up understanding that can never be brought to worship Allah's creation. But once you bring a child up believing Allah is everywhere, then it's just a matter of time before somebody tells them, hey, yeah, Allah is everywhere. He's in me, He's in you, but He's more in me than you. What does that mean? Worship me. That is Sai Baba. More than 8 million people believing He's God, worshiping Him. And among them are Muslims. I met Muslims in Sri Lanka and in Trinidad who are followers of Sai Baba. Anyway, if we take that, leave that aside, and we address some other verses, like the one where Allah said, وَنَحْنُ أَقْرَبُ إِلَيْهِ مِنْ حَبْلِ الْوَرِيدِ, and I am closer to him than his jugular vein. I say, okay, what does this mean? We say, it has to be understood in context. Just as if I say to you, Allah said in the Quran, وَلَا تَقْرَبُوا الصَّلَاةِ, do not come near prayer. Allah said that in the Quran. Don't come near prayer. Avoid prayer altogether. لا تقربوا الصلاة. What do you say to that? They say, no, you have to finish the verse. You know, Allah said, لا تقربوا الصلاة وأنتم سكارى. Don't come near prayer when you are in a state of intoxication. فَوَيْلٌ لِلْمُصَلِّينَ. Cursed are those who pray. You have to complete it. الَّذِينَ هُمْ عَنْ صَلَاتِهِمْ سَاهُونَ. Those who are negligent in their prayer. Those are the ones cursed, not everybody. So we say the same thing. Go back to your verse. What did it say before that? وَلَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ وَنَعْلَمُ مَا تُوَسْوِسُ بِهِ نَفْسُهُ وَنَحْنُ أَقْرَبُ إِلَيْهِ مِنْ حَبْلِ الْوَرِيدِ. Indeed, I have created humans, and I know what his soul whispers, for I am closer to him than his jugular vein. Allah says, He created humans, and He knows what the soul whispers. The soul, which is the most intimate part of ourselves, Allah knows whatever that soul whispers, whatever thoughts we have, Allah knows it, because He's closer to us than our jugular veins. So what is He talking about here? His being or His knowledge? His knowledge. As He knows what is in the soul, He knows everything about us because He's closer to us in knowledge than the closest thing we can imagine about ourselves. That is the meaning. And similarly, any of the other verses that you find where Allah describes, for example, Him coming between a human being and his heart, or any of you is two, He is the third. If we're three, He's the fourth, etc. These type of verses, when you go and you read the context, it's all talking about Allah's knowledge. So yes, His knowledge, His power, His mercy, it is everywhere in His creation. But not that He, in His essence, is found or to be found in His creation. This is the distinction that has to be made.